Welcome to the audio notes for this weekend's concert program of Piano, Piano, and More Piano, written by a bunch of pianist composers and played by a slew of pianists, even though most of it became music for full orchestra. But I digress. Let's start at the beginning with the brilliantly colorful España by Emmanuel Chabrier. Emmanuel Chabrier was born in 1841 and died in 1894. He was a French composer and pianist during the Romantic stylistic era, whose innovative contributions influenced many well-known composers, including Claude Debussy and Igor Stravinsky, both on this program. He began composing in earnest rather late in life due to his family insisting that he avoid music as a career. Instead, he pursued law and only composed in his spare time until he was nearly 40 years old. He was a full-time composer only for the final 14 years of his life, and without established formal training. This relative freedom to create as he wished may have helped him become the innovator for other composers who are more closely associated with the advent of modernism, like Debussy and Stravinsky, for example. España is probably Chabrier's best-known composition. It's programmed frequently in both informal and formal settings. Chabrier composed España in 1883 after a trip through Spain. His travels there exposed him to new sights and sounds, folk music, and dances of Iberian culture. He combined this with his established flair for light comic opera to create what is essentially Spanish-flavored French music. España was originally conceived as a work for solo piano, but soon transformed into the symphonic version that you'll hear, full of vibrant color and evocative sounds. It was premiered in 1883 to overnight success. A typical performance lasts about 6 minutes. Next up is the only selection on the program that started and finished its life as a showcase piece for piano and orchestra, Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini by Sergei Rachmaninoff. I am not a composer who produces works to the formulas of preconceived theories. Music, I have always felt, should be the expression of a composer's complex personality. A composer's music should express the country of his birth, his love affairs, his religion, the books that have influenced him, the pictures he loves. It should be the sum total of a composer's experiences. That quote by Rachmaninoff hits the nail on the head for his output and for this work specifically. Sergei Rachmaninoff, born 1873, died 1943, was a Russian conductor, composer, and you guessed it, pianist, who primarily wrote in a late Romantic era style during the Modernist era. He is best known today for his piano and symphonic works. Rachmaninoff left Russia after the revolution there, immigrating to the United States in 1918, first living in New York and finally in California. He spent the majority of his time traveling and performing as a soloist, but managed to compose in short bursts when he could. It was during one of these short bursts that he created his famous Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini. Rachmaninoff composed the Rhapsody in just 2 months, July and August of 1934, while on vacation from his demanding piano performance schedule. It was premiered in, of all places, Baltimore, Maryland later that year with the Philadelphia Orchestra and himself as soloist. This is a piece that feels like a concerto and sort of looks like one too, but is in fact an unorthodox approach to a theme and variation structure where the theme is not fully stated until after the first variation, and thereafter it appears in skeletal forms, fragments, or rather famously, as with the 18th variation, stretched and turned upside down, for example. Rachmaninoff gives it the title Rhapsody partly for this reason. It just sort of leans into the fantastical world of the theme. Now, the theme upon which Rachmaninoff bases this work is the last of a set of 24 caprices for solo violin, which Niccolo Paganini composed between 1802 and 1817. In a nod to the theme being Paganini's 24th caprice, Rachmaninoff creates 24 variations for this Rhapsody. These variations can be grouped in a way that causes the Rhapsody to feel like the 3 movements of a concerto. Variations 1 through 10 are sort of an expository first movement. Variations 11 through 18 are a sort of an expansive second movement. And variations 19 through 24 make for a compelling final movement. The first 10 variations go by very quickly. The 5th variation is wild because the piano and the orchestra are trading sound in each other's silences. It's so fast you can hardly tell that this interwoven fabric is happening. Rachmaninoff was fond of incorporating the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath tune from the Catholic Requiem Mass, into his music, and he does that in the 7th and 10th variations, sort of hiding it in plain sight within the harmonic or rhythmic structures. Even though this piece flows from variation to variation and doesn't adhere to a typical concerto structure, variations 11 through 18 form a sort of middle section in terms of style and harmonic variation. The theme comes to us in fragments here and there, giving the listener a sense of place. The influence of jazz and improvisation is baldly apparent in this piece, especially in the 15th variation. Parallels can easily be drawn to legendary jazz pianist Art Tatum, about whom Rachmaninoff warned, "We are all in trouble if Tatum should turn his interest to classical performance." In these special performances this weekend by jazz pianist Makoto Ozone, we hear overt references to Rachmaninoff's interest in the jazz idiom, beginning with the 11th variation, and then again in the solo cadenza moments that Rachmaninoff allowed. Makoto Ozone masterfully improvises on Rachmaninoff's already improvised material from Paganini. It's a refreshing new way to hear this work. Variation 18 is the most recognizable outtake in the piece. The new, lush, hyper-romantic melody that appears in this variation has an entire life of its own outside of the context of the piece, in film, in TV, and in popular music. What's so cool about this is it's pretty much just a basic inversion of the Paganini tune. Rachmaninoff turns it upside down, slows the tempo, and viola! Okay, I know it's voila, but it's way more fun to say viola. From the 18th variation to the 19th, we begin to see increasing tempo and drive, so that by the time we get to the 23rd variation, we feel like whirling dervishes. The final 24th variation brings the Dies Irae back again, along with what sound like church bells a little bit, and then the signature Rachmaninoff triumphant ending with an impish soft tag to cap it off. A typical performance of this piece lasts about 24 minutes. Now, here are a couple of fun facts for you. Rachmaninoff was reportedly so nervous about performing this work on its premiere that he drank a little bit of creme de menthe before going on stage, to calm his nerves. And this worked so well that he apparently repeated it for all future performances. The 18th variation is famously used in the film Groundhog Day. It is also used in the video game Gran Turismo 6, featuring superstar pianist Lang Lang. Most comically ick-inducing may be its inclusion in the Hooked on Romance track of the 80s abomination Hooked on Classics album, nestled between a portion of the slow movement from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the Moonlight Sonata. You're welcome. Moving along here to the third piece on the program, we have Claude Debussy and his piece Printemps. Claude Debussy was born in 1862, died in 1918. He was a French composer and, you guessed it, pianist of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, whose compositional approach signaled the dawning of modernism and a sharp move away from heavy, thick, German-influenced late Romanticism. His music was labeled impressionistic, and therefore he is associated with other composers and artists of the time as impressionist, even though he vehemently rejected this label. He knew his approach to composition offered unique and fresh ways of molding and mapping sound, and he was happy to do things his way, despite taking some guff for it from the establishment. Now, Debussy composed Printemps in 1887 while in Italy as a winner of the prestigious Prix de Rome. It was originally scored for piano four hands with a wordless chorus, possibly with the original intention to orchestrate it for full orchestra. About the inspiration, he wrote to a friend, "The idea I had was to compose a work in a very special color, which should cover a great range of feelings. It is to be called springtime, not a descriptive springtime, but a human one. I should like to express the slow and labored birth of beings and things in nature, their gradual blossoming, and finally the joy of being born into some new life." Printemps is a sort of symphonic suite in two movements. The first movement is marked very moderate speed, and the second movement is just marked moderate. These function more or less as a prelude followed by a dance, and they flow really pretty much seamlessly from one to the next. Printemps wasn't premiered until 1913, after having been orchestrated by his friend and colleague Henri Bousset at Debussy's request and under his supervision. This orchestrated version retains the piano four hands, so that's two players on one piano, but replaces the chorus with a very colorful full orchestra. Approximately 11 trillion extra points go to whichever of these two guys decided to include the super juicy viola solo in the first movement. A typical performance of Printemps lasts about 15 minutes. And just as an extra little nerd alert, even though the element of spring in the title is the only link between them, it might be fun to compare and consider fellow French composer Lily Boulanger's 6-minute piece for orchestra, a Morning in Spring, written in 1918. Of a Spring Morning is the title for it. The energy is definitely different, as is the stylistic approach. Both Boulanger and Debussy were winners of the coveted Prix de Rome competition, but sadly Boulanger died at just 25 years old. So Of a Spring Morning was one of her last completed works. And it is quite wonderful as a sort of a mirror of what Debussy was going for as well. All right, the final piece on our program now is the largest and most complex one, and that would be Igor Stravinsky's Petrushka. Igor Stravinsky was born in 1882, died in 1971. He was a Russian-born composer, conductor, and anyone? Bueller? That's right, a pianist who immigrated to France in 1934 and then to the United States in 1945. He was very well established as a leading composer of the modernist style, growing out of the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century, and continues to be one of the most highly regarded, influential, and most performed composers of the 20th century. Stravinsky composed Petrushka in 1911. It was the second in what would become a set of 3 ballets produced by Sergei Diaghilev's Ballet Russe. He revised and reworked the ballet score into an orchestral suite in 1946, which was published in 1947. And this is the version most frequently performed now, although the ballet does remain very popular as well. Stravinsky's original plan for this music was a concert piece for solo piano and orchestra. In 1921, he made a super virtuosic arrangement for solo piano dedicated to Arthur Rubinstein called 3 Movements from Petrushka. He admitted at the time he made the arrangement for Rubinstein that he couldn't play it himself since he had written it too challenging for his own left-hand technique. Just kind of a fun fact there. Petrushka is the name of the lead character, a coarse trickster puppet character popular throughout Europe. It's Punch in England, Pulcinella in Italy, for example. The ballet storyline focuses on a love triangle between Petrushka and 2 other puppet characters, the ballerina and the Moor. In the story, all 3 of these puppets are brought to life by a magician during the Shrovetide Fair. Petrushka is in love with the ballerina. The ballerina rejects him in favor of the Moor. Petrushka challenges the Moor, who overpowers and kills him right in front of the horrified crowd at the fair. The police and the magician are called to the scene, where the magician calms the crowd by reminding them these are only puppets. Petrushka's ghost rises up to mock the magician before collapsing again in a second death. And all of this is portrayed wonderfully through the sound world Stravinsky creates. He wrote about his inspiration. In composing the music, I had in my mind a distinct picture of a puppet, suddenly endowed with life, exasperating the patience of the orchestra with diabolical cascades of arpeggios. The orchestra, in turn, retaliates with menacing trumpet blasts. The ballet is divided into 4 scenes or tableaus: the Shrovetide Fair, Petrushka's room, the Moor's room, and then finally the Shrovetide Fair toward evening. Each tableau is separated by a sudden, very loud and rapid drumming, calling attention to the change of scene. The opening material in this music alone is enough to draw any listener in, with festive sounds and festival music based on popular folk tunes, organ grinder music coming from the flutes and the clarinets, and all kinds of colorful gestures from the rest of the orchestra. A typical performance lasts about 38 minutes. This program is just so wonderful and has such varied complexities to it, and just a lot of moments that really show off the orchestra, from the solo winds and brass all the way through to the strings playing as a guitar, for example, in the Chabrier, and then with all kinds of muscular and virtuosic playing all the way through to the Stravinsky. I find it really fun to play this music just because of the athleticism that's involved. And then you layer the artistry on top of that, and it just becomes a real party. So I hope you enjoy this program of Chabrier, Rachmaninoff, Debussy, and Stravinsky. It's a whole program of modernist music that sounds incredible to the ear and is delightful to the eye. Enjoy.